Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Terry Glavin. I'm legal counsel for the Department of Procurement Services at the City of Chicago. And first of all, I want to thank you on behalf of Mayor Rahm Emanuel, Commissioner Jamie Reed, the Chief Procurement Officer for the City of Chicago. I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be here today. As with any of our workshops, there's a time commitment. We try to pack it full of information for you, make it worth your while. But we realize you're taking time out of your schedule, either working your company or marketing your company, growing your company. And so we appreciate you being interested in doing business with the City of Chicago. And in order to do business with the City of Chicago, or any governmental unit for that matter, it's important to know procurement fundamentals. Now, I recognize one face from today, and I actually recognize some others from previous workshops. Some matters will overlap a little bit, but that's just the natural course of learning all the details of public procurement. But what I want to do in this workshop, or what I try to do in this workshop, is drill down into a little more of the technical detail of the procurement process, and along the way give some tips, some practical tips that might be beneficial to you. And as you'll learn through the discussion, one of the reasons why I want to give you practical tips is because public procurement, if you're not aware already, is really contract award by competition. And just like any competition, it's beneficial to know the rules of the competition. It makes you more competitive. Now, what's the interest that we have in making our vendors more competitive amongst each other? Well, the whole reason behind competitive procurement is that, at least in theory, and hopefully in practice, good competition drives prices down. So we actually want to arm you with information, make you a strong vendor pool, grow the vendor pool so there's more competitors. And by doing all that and maintaining a process with integrity, we can make purchases of goods and services at the best prices and for services at the best value as well. So those are some of the goals, some of the initial thoughts that I wanted to kick off with. I'll get started in a second, but one last thing I always like to do is I like to give you my contact information. So I'll give you my email and a number where you can reach me at our office. If you happen to miss it or don't get it down exactly right, remember this is all streamed and kept online, so you can go back to YouTube. Anything you think you missed, you might be able to go back to and check or get again. But my email is my name, so it's terrence.glavin@cityofchicago.org. That's TERRENCE.GLAVIN@cityofchicago.org. And then the number where I can be reached at the Department of Procurement Services is 312-744-0851. Sure. The phone number I think you might need is 312-744-0851. Great. Okay, so we'll get started with procurement fundamentals. Okay. Now, the procurement process, and I talk about this during another workshop, doing business with the City of Chicago, but I want to get into a little more detail today. The process of awarding contracts on behalf of the City of Chicago is accomplished primarily by the Department of Procurement Services. That's our department. Okay, and it is our mission as the contracting authority for the City of Chicago to work together within our department internally, also with departments that we service throughout the city, to have an open, fair, and timely process where we communicate, we enforce superior business practices, and as a result, award contracts to businesses so that they can have a business relationship to sell goods and services to the City of Chicago. Now, keep in mind, when I say City of Chicago, there are other governmental units out there that you might think we are actually providing contracts for, but in reality, they're separate governmental units with separate contracting authorities, separate departments, separate processes, different procedures perhaps. For example, Chicago Transit Authority purchases, maintains the trains, the buses. The field houses, the baseball diamonds throughout the city of Chicago, they're publicly available. Chicago Park District, separate governmental unit with its own purchasing authority, its own policies, its own procedures. I point that out now because, one, if you have maybe participated in their procurement process in the past, you might want to keep in mind that it may not be the same here. So if you come here, don't have the same expectations that all the rules, policies, and procedures are the same. They're very similar. Throughout the country, public procurement is very similar because it's, for the most part, based on a model procurement code established by the American Bar Association. So it's similar, but there are differences. And there's differences at the state level, there's differences at the county level throughout the country, and even in our region, the 6-county region, there's a lot of different governmental units working amongst each other or nearby each other, and they have different policies, rules, and procedures. So be aware of that. Not just so you don't stumble when you go to try and do business with a new governmental unit, but also so that you don't miss opportunities that are out there by just looking at our website, just looking in the newspaper for our advertisements. You should keep in mind that there are other opportunities out there so that you can grow your business. Today we're going to cover some procurement terms. Now, when we go over procurement terms, we do it for a reason, and the reason is that in every industry, you start speaking your own language over time, right? If you're an engineer, you start speaking engineer speak. Start thinking that everybody talks like you, and you forget a lot of people might not take for granted a lot of terms and definitions that you throw around loosely. You know, acronyms and abbreviations that most people aren't aware of, but you get very comfortable and you think everybody speaks the way I speak. And procurement's the same way. We run around City Hall and we start talking our language, talking with different departments, even other governmental units, procurement talk, and we have to remind ourselves that we have to, in order to be efficient at communication, which is one of our goals, good at communication, we have to make sure that we are being consistent with how we use terms, that we are making sure terms and definitions are clear, but there's a certain responsibility on your end as well in the vendor community that you learn the definitions and start getting comfortable with talking the procurement talk and following the procurement rules, and so that way we can meet somewhere in the middle together, the city, the vendor community, and efficiently communicate to make sure that the process of procurement is open and fair to everybody. When we get into some terms, one of the first things you're going to want to know about is you're going to want to know that when you pick up a opportunity that you found out about, when you want to get the details of what it is a project is about, like say you read in the newspaper, City of Chicago wants to award a contract for this type of work to be provided to the city and maybe these type of goods to be purchased. You read that little advertisement in the paper, but it doesn't tell you everything you need to know to make a decision whether or not you're qualified or even interested, for that matter, in submitting a bid or a proposal for the project. So what you do is you come down to City Hall, or these days you can get it electronically. You'll get a bid package. A bid package includes all the documents that you're going to need in order to make an informed decision about whether to compete for a project. One of the core documents are the specifications. Specifications, I'll talk about them more in detail later. Specifications are those documents that detail in writing exactly what we want to buy and how we want it delivered. Those specifications also detail how the bidding competition is going to be operated and what are the rights and responsibilities during that competition, and then what are the rights and responsibilities if you're a vendor that gets a contract awarded to you. So that bid package is a very important set of documents that you're going to pick up or receive electronically, and it's going to give you all the details about the project to help you make an informed decision. In that bid package, there's going to be a checklist that's going to help you keep it all organized and make sure you keep on track. But The checklist does not alleviate the need for you, if you're really serious about bidding or submitting a proposal, of reading every page of the bid package and every line of every page. Because as I'll discuss in a little bit, your failure to comply with any requirements that are articulated in that bid package, even failing to initial a page where you're required to initial a page to show you're going to honor the requirements, or to have the president of your company sign where required, and instead you have perhaps a clerk from your office sign the bid and making it non-binding and ultimately something that might need to be rejected. Cross your T's, dot your I's, read every page, read every line. That is the tip I want to give to you, so that when you do put the time into picking up a bid package, reviewing it, deciding you're going to bid, and submitting a bid or proposal, all that time and effort should not be wasted on a technical foul that results in your bid being rejected. So you pick up that bid package. Why are you doing that? You're doing it because you want a contract that creates a business relationship between you and the city of Chicago. A contract is a written agreement between you and the city, the parties, where you agree to offer goods and or services to the city. And I want to point out that there are a number of different forms of contracts. They're all binding agreements, and when I say there's different forms of contracts, basically somewhat different formats, somewhat different labels. At the end of the day, though, they are binding documents that create business relationships. I discussed what a bid package is. That's the first step after you've heard about an opportunity in getting yourself familiar with how you're going to get to that end goal of having a contract with the city of Chicago. Actually, I shouldn't say the contract's your end goal, because really that just starts your relationship. So it's not the finish line when you get that contract. But as far as the procurement award, the contract award process, getting that contract is your initial goal. Now, when you pick up that bid package, you review it, you decide you're going to bid if it asks for a competitive low price bid, or you decide you're going to submit a proposal if it's for professional services and you want to persuade us why you're the best vendor to get a contract. So you review that bid package after you pick it up, you're ready to bid, and then what happens? We have a pre-bid conference. A pre-bid conference is sometimes mandatory, sometimes it's optional, sometimes it doesn't even occur, and we just allow you to contact our department if you have questions between the time you pick up a bid package and the time that you bid on a contract or propose for a contract. But what happens oftentimes is we have a pre-bid conference, and if there's going to be one, it'll be specified where in the bid package, and if it's mandatory or optional, that'll be specified in the bid package. But we have that pre-bid conference, and vendors are invited to come in after they've read the specifications of the bid package and ask any questions or give us any thoughts they have, any confusion they might have. And we take notes about what questions are asked at the pre-bid conference. We review the questions, and we make a determination. One determination could be that the questions tell us, hey, our bid package is fine. There's no flaws in it. It's a common sense question we need to answer just to clarify what it is that we're trying to get out of this project. And so we might submit to everybody that picked up a bid package what's called a written clarification. And a clarification is an answer to those questions. Now, we get to the pre-bid conference, and let's say a vendor or vendors ask questions that make us realize, oh, wait a minute, our bid package is flawed. There's a typo in the specifications that really creates a change in the project. Or we forgot when we handed out the bid packages to put pages 30 through 90 in all the packages, and so now the specs don't make any sense. So we need to make a change. If we make a change, We do it by way of written addendum, or if there's multiple versions or multiple changes, addenda. And what it is our written notice telling everybody, these are the changes we're making in the specifications. And if you submit a bid, you're going to need to be bound by these additional changes. Now, if a contract has already been awarded, the competition is over, and we're going to make changes to the contract obligations, the rights and responsibilities. It's no longer an addendum or a clarification. Well, a clarification never changes anything. It just answers and clarifies. But it's pre-contract award and addendum. Post-award, it's either a contract amendment or modification, and it's basically a document in writing signed by all the parties that changes the rights and responsibilities within the contract agreement. I keep saying bid. What is a bid? A bid is basically a well, a bid can either be the document that's actually submitted, but we also oftentimes call the competition itself a bid. But basically, it's where a contract is awarded by competition, and by law, it's to the lowest and responsive bidder. This is the majority. The majority of contracts are awarded by this method. The requirement that most contracts be awarded to the lowest responsive bidder is found in state law, which we are bound by. And what does it basically mean? Well, we all know what lowest bidder is, right? We've all either done an online auction or competed for something where we've bidded, try to get the lowest price in, and the award goes to the lowest price, or the reverse is when you're online bidding on something like eBay, it's highest bid. But basically, you're competing by offering the lowest or the highest bid that you can. When we award work, we want to get it for the best price, so we award it to the lowest bidder. The law also requires a second and third element. The second element is that the vendor be responsive. That means that the vendor agrees when they submit that bid to give us what we want the way we want it. If our project specifications say that we want fire trucks with 2-story ladders on top, and it must be 2 stories, then you can't swoop in and offer the lowest price but claim you're only going to give us fire trucks with ladders that are 1 story high, because we need to be able to go up at least 2 stories or higher perhaps. So if you fail to give us what we want the way we want it, you're not being responsive, and we will reject your bid. The third element is responsible. Responsibility is that you are presently capable of delivering what we want the way we want it. So you have the financial stability to stay in business through the life of the contract. You have the equipment. If you're a construction company, hard to do construction work if you have no equipment. It's hard to build a runway out at O'Hare Airport unless you have the background to get security clearance to get onto airport property. It is difficult to cover a citywide project if you don't have enough vehicles or a strong enough fleet to get the work done all over the city, with maybe garages all around the area. So you got to be the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Now, we don't always buy commodities. Commodities are goods that many vendors sell, right? Why do we do commodities or goods by competitive bid? Because if you sell me a pencil, number 2 pencil, does anyone even have number 2 pencils anymore? I don't know. But you sell me a number 2 pencil, and then you have number 2 pencils in your inventory. Do I really care if you sell it to me versus you versus the next vendor? No, all I care about is getting the best price, because a pencil is a pencil is a pencil. It's different though, however. Let's say, for example, you want to get health care. You want to get physicians to deliver health care services. I mean, think about your own personal life. Do you just go to the classifieds and look for, hot sale on physician services, lowest prices in the city. No, you look for the best doctor you can find, keeping in mind you have a budget. So you have your budget in mind. You want to get good quality. And what you do is you balance quality and price to find the best value. And when you're doing that, you can't do it by competitive bids, so you do it through one of two other processes, a request for proposal process or request for qualification process. RFP, request for proposal, is where we put out an advertisement, just like we do for competitive bids, in a newspaper or on the city's website. We notify the vendor community, hey, we've got this project. We want to do business with someone or group or business. But instead of saying, please submit a bid, we say we are requesting proposals, RFP. In response to this type of solicitation, you will submit, if you're interested, a proposal, which is a persuasive written document telling us why you are the vendor that will deliver the best value. If we allow it, you might even be, in your proposal, submitting solutions, alternative solutions, better ways for us to complete the project than we even thought of. Other times we might just say, we know what we want, stick to the script, stick to the specs. But that's one of the reasons why you got to read those bid packages from front to back, because you got to know exactly what we want and the way we want it so that you can be responsive. You also want to read it front to back because you want to know how we're going to evaluate you as a vendor in an RFP to determine whether you're responsible. What's the criteria? Are we going to be looking at financial statements? Are we going to be looking at your corporate resume to see if you've ever done this type of work for a large city versus perhaps you've done this type of work for extremely small cities with a different type of capacity need. RFPs are typically when we're going to award a specific scope that we know, specific scope of work to one vendor. But sometimes there's a case where we don't always know the exact details of work that we're going to need going forward in the future. We know the general scope, but we don't know very project-specific scope. I always use the example for this of road construction. When we do road construction, there are many variables, but when you do construction, you need not only the construction services, but you need engineering services to go hand in hand with the road construction. And those engineering services are what? They're professional in nature. It does make a difference what one engineer can do versus another engineer. So we use a other than a competitive bid process. But then you ask yourself, well, should I do an RFP? Well, no. Unless you know exactly what section of road you're going to be doing and you know exactly when the funding is going to be available from the state government or the federal government, unless you know all that right away, you would step back and say, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a pool of vendors, and in this instance, engineers, and I'm going to have that pool exist for, let's say, 5 years, so that when funding comes in and we're told, hey, you can repair or build roads with this money, but you got to do it now, we've got a pool of vendors that are on call. We don't have to say, whoa, wait a minute, we got to advertise this, we got to wait for proposals to come in, we got to evaluate proposals. There are instances where you don't have the luxury of that kind of time. You need to have vendors on call, so you have a pool. And what you do is you create that pool doing an RFQ, or request for qualifications. It's a process that is still competitive in nature, but it starts with us soliciting vendors to submit not a low bid, not a proposal, but basically their corporate resume, their qualifications telling us why they're qualified to perform, again, using the same example, why they're qualified to engineer road construction. But it's not going to have them submit pricing and solutions, for example, to a very specific section of road on Milwaukee Avenue. No, it might say, we want to get qualifications because there's going to be work on Milwaukee Avenue that could be from the loop in Chicago all the way to the city limits on the north side. And then what happens is we receive all the written qualifications, again, like corporate resumes. We form evaluation committees. Evaluation committees determine whether or not they are responsible enough to do the future work? If they are, we qualify them, put them in a pool. There are several vendors in the pool. They enter into what's called a master consulting agreement with the city. That master consulting agreement spells out a high-level general scope, again, in this instance of engineering services for road construction. And then the vendors sit in the pool, and nothing happens right away. Because there's no guarantee of work when you're in a pool that resulted from an RFQ. But what you are is you're part of an exclusive group that gets to compete for projects in that scope that come up during whatever period the pool is created for. So let's say 3 years of the pool, or 4 years of a pool, or 5. Folks or vendors that are not in that pool can't compete for upcoming projects until that pool runs its course and reopens. So when specific projects come up, the city goes to the pool and says, we have this specific project. It's within the bigger scope of services of the master consulting agreement. There's negotiation, there's competition, but ultimately a task order is awarded to the vendor that successfully obtains the work. Again, it's professional services, so there's a balancing act of price and quality. And ultimately, that task order is like a mini contract that specifies the fine details of that specific project scope. That project might last 6 months, might last a year, whatever time is needed. When that project is done, the vendor completes that project, goes back in the pool, and waits for another opportunity to get a work assignment. And that's a summary of the RFQ process. Now, when we award work or award contracts for the purchase of, or for the delivery of goods, one of our goals is to encourage participation by historically disadvantaged groups. This is good for the groups that gain access to contracting opportunities and contracting dollars, but it's good for the city because it strengthens and expands the vendor pool or vendor community that's out there. I don't want to say pool because you're going to think it's always about RFQs, but by inclusion, we increase the vendor community in size and strength, and as a result get, in theory, better prices. So there's an MBE, WBE, DBE participation program. It's created by the Chicago Municipal Code. I'm sorry, MBE and WBE are created by the Chicago Municipal Code. That is in section 292-420 of the Chicago Municipal Code. If you're ever interested in looking something up on the Chicago Municipal Code, there's a website. It's the authorized publisher. It's amlegal.com, AMLEGAL.com. So you can find the core of the program in the Chicago Municipal Code at that section. What is an MBE? It's a minority-owned business enterprise, certified by the City of Chicago. What is a WBE? It's a women-owned business enterprise. Now there's also DBE, that's disadvantaged business enterprise. When you do federally funded projects, if there's federal dollars involved, oftentimes federal rules apply when you use federal money. And DBE is a federally used designation. It's really like MBE and WBE combined under federal rules. But we have to follow those federal rules oftentimes because we're using federal money on certain projects. So what I want to point out is that we have these certifications so that we know if we're providing opportunities, it's to eligible firms, the firms that we actually have found to be historically disadvantaged. And what we do is we include them in participation. What does that mean? It means typically involving certified firms in subcontracting opportunities. So encouraging primes, setting goals for primes to have subcontract relationships. So a portion of city work or city purchases of goods goes to subcontractors that are certified MBE and or WBE firms. MBE and WBE firms can also come in as direct prime vendors. I mean, they can bid themselves. They can propose. They don't have to sit back and say, oh, I only get to be a subcontractor. You can also submit bids and proposals to be a prime contractor if you're a certified firm. I also want to point out that you could be eligible to be certified as a historically disadvantaged firm, but you don't have to get the certification if you don't want to. And you don't have to have the certification to be eligible to bid. So if you look in the paper today, you see an opportunity and the bid is due tomorrow and you run around, you get that bid package and you're ready to go, and you think to yourself, oh, I'm not certified, I'm eligible. You can still bid or propose for that project. It's just you're not going to get any benefits of being certified until the city actually certifies you. But it's not anything that's going to stop you from bidding if you're not certified yet. But if you believe you're eligible for a certification, I encourage you to get started right away on the application, because it does take time for us to review and look into the firms to be able to certify them as historically disadvantaged. So I encourage you to get started right away, even if you don't know of an opportunity you want to participate in. We have separate workshops on how to get certified, once you have your certification, what to do with it, how you can take advantage of it. So please check out the workshop schedule outside this room as well as online to get more information about those workshops. In addition to prime contracting, in addition to subcontracting, you can also get participation through indirect involvement. So for example, if you are a company that sells goods to the city and you look all around, you try to find a certified firm to subcontract with to take on a portion of that contract so you can get participation goals met, and you just absolutely cannot find anybody, because there are some areas of work where there are just still not certified firms in those sectors. And so if you exercise good faith and diligence trying to find firms and they're just not out there, and we look, if they're just not out there, sometimes there's other ways to participate. Like for example, you might sell the goods or services to the city. You can't find any participation because there's no one in that business sector available that's certified. But maybe you hire a certified firm to do maintenance on your corporate headquarters or to maintain your fleet of vehicles. Now that work might not be directly related to the work of your contract with the city, but it's still benefiting certified firms that they are getting work, and so there is credit that can be obtained by indirect participation. So keep that in mind. But direct participation obviously is the preference, but indirect participation can be beneficial and approved as well. Now, indirect participation, I just want you to see it spelled out a little bit, but in order to receive credit for participation in an MBE, WBE, firm must perform a commercially useful function. And again, that's whether it's direct participation, that's whether it's indirect participation. But there has to be a commercially useful function performed by the certified firm. So you can't just see the contract documents, the solicitation, and say, oh, the city wants 25% of the contract participation to go to an MBE firm, and oh, the city wants 6% or 5% to go to a WBE firm. You can't say, oh, what I'll do is, I don't want anyone working with me, but I know this firm out there that's certified. I'll get them to say that they're doing the work. I'll give them a little bit of money on the side, and that way the city feels good about that they, it looks like on paper there was participation, but I don't have to actually include anybody. This will work this will make everybody happy. And the certified firm doesn't have to do any work. They're getting money for doing nothing. This is really good. Well, no, that doesn't work. And the reason is this. It's not just about getting tax dollars to flow through to the historically disadvantaged firms. It's about much more than that. It's about having firms build capacity, build experience, so that ultimately those certified firms can grow. Now, it's also about getting a percentage of the tax dollars, getting a piece of the contracting pie. Nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't really, for the long term, do any benefit for anyone if there's not actual work experience in capacity building. And so it has to be actual work being performed, a commercially useful function, and a commercially useful function is where someone's really managing their own work, actually doing their own work, you know, taking responsibility for it. It also teaches the certified firms how to just do business with the city, because it is different in several ways from doing business with a private customer. There's perhaps a little more regulation because there's more transparency. There might be more documentation involved in the process, more compliance, more audits, additional audits, because we're always reviewing to make sure tax dollars are being spent properly. So we also not only want to make sure that certified firms know how to do the work they're being hired to do, but they also know how to do work with the city or other governmental units. When I mentioned that sometimes there are just not firms out there that do the type of work that's needed for subcontracting, sometimes it goes all the way to indirect participation. Sometimes there's just not the ability to get certified firms included. So there are occasions where in writing you can submit a request that our goals for participation be reduced or even waived. But we're going to want to see, and we're going to document, or we're going to see the documentation, and we're going to review whether or not there was good faith effort, in other words, diligence, an exhaustion of efforts, if you will, to find certified firms out there, to make sure that no stone was left unturned, make sure that if there was a potential for participation, that it actually was actually looked into. And then this is the definition for commercially useful function. Again, this is basically a statement that we are interested in the vendors actually doing the work, actually building their capacity, managing, supervising, and getting involved in the project. 292-460 is a section of the municipal code that allows us to award contracts on what we call a target market basis. So there are certain projects where we will advertise and solicit from certified firms only at first. So the first round of bids or proposals will come only from certified firms. And if there's responsive and responsible bidders in that pool of exclusive target market vendors, and we have a low price or a good value, we will award. If, for example, and this does happen, we put the ad out there and just no one shows interest, there's no participation, what we will then do, if we are still interested in completing the project, put it back out to the vendor community generally and allow everybody to compete. But at least we gave the first shot to the certified firms, and that's the purpose behind this ordinance. We do not do, we're not allowed to do target market projects for construction projects. They may not be bid as target market. Now there's a separate workshop for certification, but I just want to point it out, in addition to MBE, WBE, and DBE, there's also BEPD, that's business enterprises owned by people with disabilities. And there's ACDBE, that's Airport Concession Disadvantaged Business Enterprises. That's when there is work needed by certified firms out at the airports. And again, that's a federal set of rules that we start abiding by because they're out at the airport. And airports are regulated and funded in many ways by the federal government. So it's a subset of DBE is ACDBE. At a high level, what do you really need to know about certification at this point is really just at first blush. Do you think you're eligible or not eligible? To be eligible, the individual that is the basis for the qualification has to be 50, or individuals have to be 51% owners, and they have to control the firm. They can't just be brought on as a low-level employee, maybe given a little stock ownership. No, it's got to be a 51% owner or greater. Could be individually or combined. and then the person actually has to control. They have to come to the table with some experience in the industry they're working in. It has to be meaningful participation and ownership and control. And it's similar for BEPD. And the last note I want to point out at the bottom there, we accept Cook County certification. So if you go through the Cook County process and you're certified as a historically disadvantaged firm, MBE or WBE, you can come to us and we'll honor that certification. When you're doing business with the city, be prepared. We're going to need to know a little bit about you. So you'll be filing online an economic disclosure statement. Our form economic disclosure statement is created based on state law and federal law that requires certain disclosures and certifications to be made for firms that have 7.5% or greater ownership or beneficial interest in the prime contractor. So if you're a sole proprietor of your company, you're just a one-person shop, probably not that big of a deal to you because you have to fill it out, but you're going to fill out, it's about a 5-page form, maybe give or take a few pages. What's your name, what's your address, have you ever been convicted of a criminal offense, have you ever been debarred by another governmental unit from doing business? Check, check, check. Hopefully you don't have any problems. Where it does get complicated, though, is we deal with many large corporations with tens of thousands of employees, sometimes operating in several different countries, with complex ownership structures where ownership levels go 5 companies deep. One company owns 100% of it. Another company above that owns 100% of the company before it. And to get down to who really operates and gets the benefit of the company, you have to go way up into the tree. And that's why it's 7.5% ownership in the prime, direct or indirect. So if the prime contractor we're doing business with has one company that's 100% owner, and then there's another company 100% owner, they can go up 100 levels of corporate legal structure, and we're still going to say, okay, give us the next EDS. We want to know about the next company until we drill down to who's got the interests behind the scenes. And that goes as low. Someone can have 5% interest and it won't trigger the legal requirements for disclosure. Only reason I mention all that, if anyone here in the room works for an extremely large company, look at the EDS in advance, get familiar with it, because we can't award a contract until the disclosures are complete. That's by law. And so the real shame of it is you won the competition. We want to do business with you. We've got orders on deck, and you're ready to make some money off city business, and we can't even give you the contract because we don't have all your disclosures done. So just get familiar with the rule, the process. If you have any questions, you can give me a call. I am part of the team that reviews economic disclosure statements. There's also city's law department gets involved in the review of economic disclosure statements. So get familiar with the online form at the very least so that you're ready to roll when you've won a competition. What I want to do is point out that there are a number of resources available for you to learn more. The workshops are an obvious resource. Keep in mind the schedules that are out there. Sign up for DPS alerts. That's the electronic notifications that we send out. Pick up our handouts at each of the workshops. But don't forget, you can go to the DPS website and get information. You can actually see historical contracts that were awarded and contracts that are active. You can see amendments. You can see modifications. You can see payments that have been made to vendors. You can see bid tabulations. Bid tabulations are where we summarize on any given project who bid, how much they bid. You can actually see, for example, let's say you are interested in a project that the city has. Let's be honest, the city purchases a lot of the same things over and over again, right? There are definitely a lot of innovations where we buy things for the first time, especially in the information technology arena. But then there's a lot of things we just buy over again. Car tires for police cars and fire vehicles. I mean, they might be updated a little bit more, higher quality, hopefully over the years, maybe you know, more advanced, better handle the weather. But we're going to buy tires and tires and tires. So if you're a tire dealer, for example, you might look on the website, and there's a search engine you can actually look up by description. You know, tire sales, or you know, you got to play around like anything else with maybe your description, but you can pull up and see whether or not the city buys what you sell. And then you can see if the city has an active contract for what you sell. Now, you might get excited because you open the current contract and holy cow, it's expiring in 2 months. So that means the next opportunity probably is coming around. So you start monitoring the paper or the city's website, or making sure you open our emails where we give electronic alerts, because you know an opportunity is probably going to come up soon where we're going to advertise that tire contract or whatever it is that you sell. What you might want to do is you might want to open up the bid tabulation for the project that's still active and see, what did the vendors bid last time? Who were the vendors that bid? Now, prices are probably going to go up. Your costs as a vendor getting the tires or whatever supplies you need have probably gone up. So you might not be able to bid exactly what the winning bidder submitted the last go around, but at least you have an idea of who you're going to be competing against and where they were at, and maybe incorporating inflation and other factors, maybe you can figure out how you can get as close to that price as possible, if not better, or at least how you can be more competitive than the other folks. You also might be a certified firm, and what you can count on is, more often than not, the vendors that submitted for the last time the project was awarded are going to submit again, and maybe they need subcontractors to meet the goals on the next go around. So you can contact vendors from the bid tabulation, say, hey, I'm out here, I'm certified, I think you're going to bid on that contract when it comes due again and it goes back out for competition. Would you consider hiring me as a certified MBE, or would you consider hiring, if you're a woman-owned firm, would you consider hiring me as your WBE? That's if you want a subcontract as opposed to compete directly as the prime contractor. So there's a lot of business intelligence you can gather from the DPS website that would make you more competitive. So I talked at the very beginning, I said you want to be competitive because it's a competitive process. The way to do that is, I said at the beginning, is to know the rules of the game. It's not a game, but it's got rules, so it is a competition, and some might label that a game. But just knowing the rules is not going to set you up for victory, right? It's good to have additional supplemental information, and I think our website does a good job of being one source of information for you to be competitive in your bid or proposal. We also, through our website, as I mentioned, put out advertisement of our bidded opportunities. We do that weekly. We have new certification initiative information. These programs that encourage inclusion and opportunity, even the playing field, they're constantly being tweaked to achieve to make it more likely that we're going to achieve the goal of each program. If you're a prime trying to plan your bid or proposal and you need participation to meet contract goals, we have an MBE, WBE directory where you can look up and try and find firms to do business with. Maybe you're an MBE or WBE firm and you want to bid as a prime, but you don't have the capacity for the entire scope of a project. Remember I said you have to be responsible, presently capable? Well, sometimes you might be a small business or a MBE or WBE firm. You might be small in size. You might love the idea of doing a certain project, but it's just a little too big for you right now. Then you might go to the database, look for an MBE, WBE firm that has services or goods that complement what you do. And by joining together, you can bid on a project, combining your capacity and together being responsible for a project. You can do that by way of joint venture. Joint venture is a written agreement between two business entities that they're going to, in fact, do that, join forces join their equipment, join their employees, join their financial stability, maybe their bonding capacity. Bring it together so that combined they can do what individually they could not. When we award a contract, we award to a vendor like that, or a group of vendors like that, we award it to the joint venture, not to one or the other company that got involved. And all this information I'm talking about can be found at cityofchicago.org/procurement. I also want to encourage you to connect with us online. Our department's very active on Facebook, Twitter, and other forms of social media. If you connect with us, you're going to stay up to date on any innovations that we're coming up with, any opportunities that we're coming up with. So it's a good idea. By connecting with us online, as you know, you can passively stay on top of what it is that we're doing and what opportunities are available. Or actively, if you want to let us know what's going on or who you are, or you know, what your interests are or what your comments are. Keep in mind whenever you make contact with the city, there are lobbying laws and ethics rules as far as how contacts are made. Just always make sure that you're in compliance with those lobbying and ethics requirements. I'm going to open it up for questions, and then I'll also stick around afterwards if anyone wants additional conversation about a matter. If you have a question right now about something very high level that you think everyone might be interested in, that's the kind of question that would be great right now, and we'll talk it through. If you have a question, however, that's very unique to your company, or even more specific, like specific to a project, what I'll do is, why don't I meet with you after the session, and then we can see whether or not I can respond to questions that are project specific. And one of the reasons is, as counsel for the department, if there's, for example, a dispute, or if there's you know, something that's I guess subject to interpretation, I just want to address that when the session is closed. Yes.
Going back to the whole idea of compliance with customer qualification, you were talking about the master consulting agreement and how you can get into this pool. And I was just wondering if you can just clarify that a little bit. So if I wanted to be part of this RFP pool, you know, get certified obviously and apply to be in the qualifications. So
I want to clarify one thing though, so there's not confusion. So the question is, and I'm repeating the question so that it's heard online. The question is, can I clarify the process of getting into the RFQ pool? And the first clarification I want to make is, you said, okay, you submit your qualifications, you get certified. I just want to make sure everyone's clear. Certification, as far as this workshop, I talked about in the context of being certified as a historically disadvantaged firm. When you go through the RFQ process, I understand why you said the words "get certified." It's not really a certification though, because I don't want to make it anyone leave here thinking you have to be a disadvantaged firm to get into a RFQ pool. That's definitely not the case. So, just for purposes of this discussion, when I said certified, I was talking about being certified as a historically disadvantaged group. RFQ process is about qualifying. Splitting hairs a little bit, but let's stick to defining it as qualifying. So you submit for a pool, and then you are qualified. And then the pool is basically closed to outsiders who are not qualified during that initial process for whatever number of years the pool is established for. It can be established for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, depending on what the needs of the city are. And I interrupted you with purpose. I hope you don't mind. There's, I think, more to your question.
yeah, so I guess you mentioned this term, master consulting agreement.
Yes.
So can you explain what that is?
So, whenever you're doing business with the city, you, for the most part, are going to do that business by way of a written contract. And typically a written contract, if it's drafted well, it's going to be very precise on even fine details, so that everyone's expectations about their rights and responsibilities are known at the beginning when you enter into the agreement. So there's no unknowns, there's no variables, because unknowns and variables, what they do is tend to create litigation, tend to create a less than true meeting of the minds, and those disagreements later turn into conflict. So you want contracts typically that really lay out the details of what the project's going to be and what are the rights and responsibilities. But I mentioned earlier, sometimes you don't know exactly when you're going to get funding for certain projects. You don't know the fine details, the road conditions. Remember, I used road engineering as in my example. You don't know all the details of specific projects that are going to come up. So you sort of give up some of that certainty and you form a less precise contract called a master consulting agreement. It lays out the very general work that's going to be done. So if we have a master consulting agreement for road construction engineering, the master consulting agreement will say, we want road construction engineering in the city of Chicago. But it's not going to say, like a normal contract, we want road construction engineering for Milwaukee Avenue from Damon to North Avenue. That would be specific, but we don't know we're going to work on that section right away. So what we do is we create a broader agreement where we've locked everyone into an understanding that they're in a pool, we're not going to go elsewhere, but also if we go to them, they're going to be ready to do the work. And then when we go to them, armed with the information about a specific project and where the funding's coming from that specific project, we then go to the pool and we look for the best value among the pool and ultimately enter into a task order, which is a contract that's more specific. It actually says Milwaukee Avenue, Damon to North Avenue. And the road conditions during this time when the work's going to be done, which is December through February, you start specifying the time, the road conditions. You will or will not be able to have a trailer on the sidewalk next to your road work, like that kind of detail. Must be completed within 120 days. Later than that, there will be damages. What are the damages? So there's all this detail. That's the task order. That's the mini contract that's project specific within the larger master consulting agreement that's awarded at the beginning and at the beginning and end of the pool period. The task order starts and finishes within any given time of the pool period. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, mostly.
Okay.
So if you apply to get into this pool, are you automatically accepted, or?
If you're not qualified, you don't get in.
Okay, so there are qualifications and
yes.
It's all explained in the RFQ.
Right. So it's all explained in the RFQ. See, and that's the takeaway. I think that's probably the most important thing from this is that bid package. Read it front to back. It will spell out the whole, what process is being used, what type of contract is being awarded, what's the process for awarding it, and then ultimately what are the details of what's being awarded. Now, I'm not going to end our session of question and answer, but I am going to wrap up the online portion because we're limited to 1 hour. So again, if anyone's looking for follow-up or they forgot a few details from today, they can go online, see this presentation online. I'm going to stick around, answer some questions generally, and I'll stick around even later to answer project-specific questions if anyone has any. But thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll end the online session right now.